Cupid laid by his brand and fell asleep. A maid of Dian's this advantage found, and his love-kindling fire did quickly steep in a cold valley fountain of that ground, which borrowed from this holy fire of love a dateless, lively heat, still to endure, and grew a seething bath, which yet men prove against strange maladies a sovereign cure. But at my mistress' eye, love's brand new fired. The boy for trial needs would touch my breast. I, sick withal, the help of bath desired, and thither hied a sad distemper'd guest, but found no cure. The bath from my help lies where Cupid got new fire, my mistress' eyes. The little love god, lying once asleep, laid by his side his heart-inflaming brand, whilst many nymphs that vowed chaste life to keep came tripping by. But in her maiden hand the fairest votary took up that fire, which many legions of true hearts had warmed, and so the general of hot desire was sleeping by a virgin hand disarmed. This brand she quenched in a cool well by, which from love's fire took heat perpetual, growing a bath and healthful remedy for men diseased. But I, my mistress thrall, came there for cure, and this by that I prove. Love's fire heats water, water cools not love. All right, here we are, the final two sonnets. Shakespeare wrote 154 sonnets. These are sonnets 153 and 154. We made it! Yay! Although, I won't lie, I'm baffled by these two sonnets. It doesn't make sense. They don't fit in with the rest of the sonnets. They're just stylistically very different. Technically speaking, they're called anacreontic poems. It's a fancy word for a style of poetry that's Greek-inspired and deals with themes like sex and love and drinking and youthful hedonism, that sort of thing. It was a very common style of poetry at the time, and it was very common for poets to adapt a Greek myth into a poem, but they just don't seem to fit in with the other 152 sonnets. Those sonnets seem to be Shakespeare putting his heart on a platter. They're very personal. These two sonnets are about a seemingly random Greek myth. They're both telling the same story. They're both adapted from the same poem written in the 5th century AD. And they're talking about Cupid. Cupid falls asleep one night and leaves his torch by his bedside, his torch of eternal love, his torch that makes people fall in love with each other. In the first sonnet, while Cupid is sleeping, the torch is stolen by a maid of Diana, a maid of the goddess Diana. In the second, it's stolen by a nymph. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's stolen by a mythical female figure who has sworn a vow of chastity. So this mythical female figure who's sworn a vow of chastity takes the torch and tries to extinguish it in a pool or a well of water. And it extinguishes the torch, but it makes the water heat up and bubble for eternity. And from that day on, men come to bathe in the waters and cure themselves of their love sickness, aka their syphilis. Yes, baths were a common treatment for syphilis at the time. And the first sonnet even goes a step further and says that as Cupid is standing there with his torch, the speaker's mistress, which we can assume is the Dark Lady, looks at Cupid and it reignites the torch. And Cupid, to test out this new flame, holds it against Shakespeare's chest. And Shakespeare, or the speaker, gets sick and goes to bathe in the waters to try to cure himself. But they don't cure him. The only thing that can cure him of his love sickness is the same thing that reignited the torch in the first place, his mistress' eyes. So, moral of the story in both sonnets is you can try to extinguish the fires of passion, but it won't work. It'll just heat up the waters for eternity. In other words, you can't escape the fires of passion, the fires of love, no matter what you do. So I have a couple of different ideas about these two sonnets. It's possible that Shakespeare was drawn to this story and wanted to adapt it because it reminded him of his relationship with the Dark Lady. And it makes sense. There's a lot of sexual imagery in here. I mean, a torch is a very traditionally phallic object, and pools of water or wells of water are traditionally symbolic of the female sex organ. And there's all this syphilis talk too, of course. But this theme of no matter what you do, you can't escape desire, you can't escape passion, that rings true for all of the Dark Lady sonnets for sure. But also, it might just be that these two sonnets were tacked on by an editor or a publisher. I know I like to say that Shakespeare doesn't make mistakes, that it's usually a good bet to assume that things are done on purpose. But it just seems like these two sonnets are two drafts of the same sonnet. Maybe Shakespeare only intended one of them to be published, but both of them accidentally got published. Or maybe the publisher just came across them and they weren't intended to be published in this sequence, but was like, hey, let's throw these two sonnets in, bonus. You know, I don't know. They don't seem to fit. They just seem tacked on. So I don't know. I don't have an answer, alas. All we can do is speculate. But, you know, that's what I've been doing this whole time. Speculating is fun. Best educated guess. So anyway, that's it. That's sonnets 153 and 154, and that completes the cycle. I set out to do 30 sonnets in 30 days when I began. I actually ended up doubling that. I did 60 sonnets in 57 days. But I actually have one more. I saved my favorite sonnet for last, so I will be back tomorrow with one more sonnet. In the meantime, stay safe, everybody. All my love. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you tomorrow. Bye.